Hey guys, this is Professor Nelson. I'm going to try and put together some demo movies on the rendering techniques we've been doing. This is going to be a stone rendering page. Going to be doing a diamond on top. Going to be doing colored stone on the bottom. So let's go. Starting with the diamonds. We're going to put in a wash of medium gray. With diamonds in particular, it's not critical to go right up to the edge of the line. A little white border actually doesn't hurt the effect at all. And since these will be painted in settings or surrounded by metal, more than likely, it just really isn't critical to fill all the way in. Down here I will do a few different colors. I've got an amethyst color set already up here, so I will definitely do one of these in amethyst. Make the big one over here on the side an amethyst. You're going to use a middle color. Once again, a middle value. Also going to do a ruby. Try that. Yeah, that's fine. And an emerald. Okay, now the next step for all of the stones is going to be to shade the upper left corners. This represents the shading of the pavilion, or the bottom of the stone. Remember, we're basically dealing with two conical forms, one below, one above. So the one below, if you're looking at like a conical cup, the light comes in, shades here, highlights there, shades here, highlights here. It's going to be the same for the color. And it's a little too heavy. That's better. Once again, not a tremendous need for accuracy. Okay, giving some value to the pavilion of the stones. Now for the white stones only, the diamonds, we're going to come back in to the lower right hand corner and do a similar treatment. Going to wash in a little bit of light. Colored stones, we're going to leave them as they are. The next step is to put in indicate some faceting on the pavilion of the stones. So like so. Going to do it with a dark color and a fairly sharp brush. For the emerald cut, for the emerald cut, we're going to start with a culet line. The emerald cut has a long vertical culet, or horizontal culet if you're on the horizontal orientation down here. Now, as I'm working with the computer, I can be quite precise about this. With a brush, it's going to be harder to do this sort of thing. You don't have to be as particular as I'm being about these shapes. I'm being very particular, or somewhat particular, at least, because I can. It isn't an investment really in any additional time or effort for me to do a cleaner job. The tool tends towards that anyway. Okay, so I've laid in some facet lines for the pavilion in the white diamond. Now I'm going to go into the color. It's the same principle. What you want is somewhat random. You don't want to have it be too predictable. In the end, you're going to want to have a nice breakdown between dark and light shapes and patterns. And the end goal is to achieve a certain amount of complexity and sparkle without having to give it too much thought. It's a formula. Once again here, we're going to have that long culet, this time horizontally oriented. It can be a little bit random. If you ever look into the pavilion of a real stone, you'll see that the patterns imply the faceting, of the stone, but they don't really follow it exactly because light is bouncing everywhere. Okay, that's enough. Now I'm going to do the same thing in white for all of the stones. I'm not going to follow the same lines I did before. I'm going to be putting in different ones. Basically just adding more complexity and more interest. I do want to keep the upper left-hand corners primarily light and the lower right-hand corners primarily, the upper left-hand corners primarily dark and the lower right-hand corners primarily white. So the amount of each color of faceting I'm going to draw in is going to be regional. I will put more of it. For example, I'll put more white in the lower right hand corners, and I'll let the dark faceting stand more in the upper left. Can't have quite as much fun with the emerald shapes. Their faceting is a little more predictable. Do the same thing with the color. Just drawing triangular types of shapes that radiate in toward the center of the stone. We'll stick with the more radiant cut stones while I'm doing them. Come back and get that step cut emerald in a minute. Because I have no idea, guys, how much memory one of these little QuickTime productions take. I'm painting as quickly as I can because I do know that our servers at FIT have very real limitations as far as what they'll allow me to upload. If I create something too big to upload, it's going to be kind of counterproductive. And what that means is I'm painting these very much like I would if I were doing it for a professional client. I'm not taking my time. It's a deadline. There are people waiting. These might turn out brilliant. They might not. I'm not going to really worry about that too much. They will turn out. That's as concerned as I'm going to get. Okay, I've drawn the faceting on the pavilions. Now I'm going to go ahead and fill in. I've outlined it. Now I'm going to fill in some of those facets. Some of those areas of color. And I will do this based on the shapes that I've drawn. If I see something else I want to do that I didn't draw, I'll certainly feel free to do that. But I'm taking my lead from the patterns of light and dark that I have kind of already delineated. And once again, keeping the biggest areas of light in the lower right hand corner. The key to rendering is you really want to keep your form. If I didn't do that, if I didn't keep my mind clear on where the light and dark was, it could be very easy to kind of pop this stone inside out, form-wise, and then it wouldn't read nearly as well. It might still be sparkly and pretty, that's true, but it would not read nearly as well. Kind of a bold shape I've just put in there. See if I get away with it. Okay, I'm calling that done. And now I know since you're working in gouache at home, you are not able to paint with the kind of impunity that I am able to paint with. I have the facets on a separate layer here. They can't be obliterated by my work. It's impossible to lose them. And that allows me to relax and thump down color in a much more direct way than I might be prone to do otherwise. What can I tell you? Sorry. I can do it in gouache as well. This is a much more predictable way to do presentation renderings, particularly when it comes to stone. Now, I actually with gouache would normally probably have painted in the darker shapes first in the upper left hand corner. It doesn't matter at the end of the day. I picked white because that's what I had on the brush after drawing the pavilion facets, and I didn't think to hop off and change color. You'll notice with the emerald cuts, I do diagonals, I do arrow shapes. I have to remain somewhat true to the faceting pattern, but to get a little more interest into these step cut type stones, I take liberties. Okay, what you'll see is that across the series here, dark has stayed dark, light has been picked up with more light. Now I'm going to come in with the dark color and do the same thing. As I mentioned before, in gouache, I tend to go dark before light, so just as a habit, I'm not saying it's the best habit, although I will say it is good to have a habit. It's good to have a pattern, a way that you do things, and kind of stick with it. And that's just kind of what I've done over the years. Is I am by tradition more or less an oil painter, so working from dark to light comes more naturally to me. It's as simple as that, I guess. Didn't care for that last line. I will continue to draw in some linear work along with filling in areas if I feel like it's necessary. There, for example, I definitely felt it was necessary. Actually, there's going to be an upper facet there that's going to already add significant interest to that area. Fine, that's enough. Felt like the white areas were getting a little too prominent in that portion of the stone. Of course, in so doing, I have created a very large dark area that will need to be broken back up. I'll do that in a minute. I'm going to come up now, and I forgot to catch some darks. Up in through here. By the way, you don't have to do every step if it's a small stone. If the stone already has enough interest, you don't have to go, okay, well, Kim said I got to do this, so I'm going to put some more of that in. No, you can choose when to call it quits, when you've got enough. I have done stones that are extremely simple compared to this, because I was in a hurry, or because it was a sketchy sort of presentation where this kind of detail would not be appropriate. There is no rules. There are no rules. There is no specific way to approach this. This is a format to get you started. Alright, now what I need to do are the facets on the top, on the crown of the stone. So now the form flips. Now the lightest area is going to be up in these areas here. and the darker areas can be down below. So I will, as usual, this time I'll stick to it, start with the dark. Now, there's a reason that happens. If I ever teach you a painter class, I'll explain to you why. At the end of a straight line segment in Painter, you either need to hit enter or you need to flip out into the freehand type of curve. Otherwise, each time you click, it's going to automatically connect your next segment with the previous one. It doesn't know you're done. Okay, so I've done these two here. I'm going to change it up a little bit and not have these dark facets follow around. I'm going to take the central section instead, and I'll do the same thing over here. That's done. On these upper girdle facets, you can see they're cut in half. When you paint these by hand, you may be lucky to get just this large triangular shape here. You may not go so far as dividing them, but if you do, or if you're working with a computer-generated template like I am, split them. Don't paint them both dark or both light, as the case may be. For obvious reasons, it makes it less interesting. Okay, I'm going to come into the colored stones. Same treatment. Just a moment. Okay, just double checking. For a minute there it looked like I wasn't recording, and that would have made me rather unhappy. Yeah, see here, this particular stone I didn't draw the split faceting in. I can of course add it. This is a pretty good sized colored stone. At scale, these stones look like this. Of course, that's not even true because your computer screen is considerably larger. But comparatively speaking, it should give you an idea. Fine, that's good enough. Very similar to what I did. If I have a great big stone like this, okay, so I have a considerably sized facet to fill. One technique I'll employ is to fill the center of the facet and not the edges. Also, to make interest, I will perhaps fill on the crown facet closest to the table. Fill one end of it, like over here, and then on the facet closer to the girdle, come in from the other side. How much you have to do in here depends entirely on the size of the stone. If you overwork a small stone, it really looks terrible. It's actually much better to underwork a large stone. You will be forgiven that if your form reads and it still has a certain sense of sparkle. No one's going to begrudge you having put in less information. But if you put in too much, and it goes from looking, instead of looking scintillating and exciting and interesting, it just becomes irritating. That's hard to forgive. Okay. The radiant cut stones are a little easier because you're dealing with a nice set pattern. Basically, the 3 facets on the lower right are dark, the 3 on the upper left are white. You can change it around a little bit, but essentially that's what you're working with. Okay. The next step is going to be going for the white. If I don't want to fill in the entire facet, I'll catch a corner of it, catch an edge or a couple of edges. The upper girdle facets, once again, I'm going to split them. Dealing with the same challenge on this large emerald cut here is that some of the interesting pavilion work I did is duplicating what I would do on the crown. It just happened to work that way. I don't try and overthink when I'm painting, so it just did that. So when that happens, I'll connect them, tie them in together. The important thing is to not lose the form. I am dealing with the same challenges you're dealing with in a way, digitally, because I am working on a drawing tablet. I am not allowing myself to rotate the paper or the canvas because I don't want to confuse you guys, which means I'm having to use my wrist in some fairly awkward angles. So if you see me undoing, that's usually the cause, which I know is something you guys don't have the luxury of. Here I'm going to delineate the edges of that facet. They're tricks, you know, this little slash line, leaving an area of dark inside. Now I know I'm going to be putting a glaze over this, so I'm going to be able to put more interest in, more detail in. There, that's fine. Back to the easy radiant cut. You can tell the templates that I drew by hand versus the ones that were generated from models in Rhino, because the ones I drew by hand, I curved the table facets because I think they're prettier. In real life, facets never have a curved edge. They're always flat and straight. I've talked to myself for years about going into my library and converting all the stones to one or the other, but haven't managed to do so yet. Same thing, feeling free to outline facets if I don't want to fill them in all the way. Amethyst is a pretty dark stone, so I'm going to go ahead and fill in that stone on the top, that facet on the top. That's done. Okay. You can see here I'm doing that same thing I talked about before, where I will split the directionality, fill up the top, fill up the bottom on the alternating facet. I don't do all three facets. There are three on a fully, if you indicate the full faceting, there are three facets here, boom, boom, boom. I don't do them all white because it would become boring. It would just white out. And I do not care for what I did here because I took out that dark area completely, and it actually was kind of nice. I'm leaving it back in. Same reason I'm not going to paint this corner facet going around white all the way around the corner, just because it's boring. The checkerboard effect of dark light is a lot more interesting and a lot more realistic. It's a lot more of what you would see in a real faceted stone. I'm letting the things that happen stay. If the dark areas that happen to be formed as I'm drawing and painting, if I like them, it doesn't all happen on purpose, guys. What gets left is on purpose, but what happens along the way is, as often as not on purpose. So you want to be sensitive to what's happening on your paper with your stone. Okay. Another hand-drawn stone with rounded table facets. What can I say? I actually think I like them better straight. They're prettier, rounded off in a way, but they're more uncomfortable to paint, and they're less realistic. Now see, this is getting boring, what I just did. I wasn't being sensitive enough. I want to keep some of this streaky diagonal. In fact, I'm going to emphasize it a little bit here. some of that streaky diagonal effect going into the center of the stone. I don't want to paint all of that out. And I almost managed to just then. Okay. There. Everything has been drawn and filled in. The coloring book portion of the stones is done. Now, I need to do the glazes. So for the starting with the color first, I'm going to take a moment and save this. Painter can be fickle, and it would have been unfortunate to lose what I've been doing. Okay, for those of you who are paying attention to the painter aspect, I'm making a gel layer that's about 40% transparency. That'll allow me to lay down a nice glaze. All right, amethyst. I'm going to try a little bluer shade because this is a rather red looking stone right now. I'm also going to back my paintbrush down to about 60% and make it good sized. Of course, sadly guys, none of this really helps you with the touch you need to develop with the gouache. With the gouache, remember, you have to have very watered down color. A lot of water in your paint, and yet a fairly dry brush, just beyond damp. You don't want it so dry that it drags the paint underneath, but it can't be wet enough to pool. Okay? So there's the amethyst. It's a little too blue. There's the emerald. It's a little too violet. It's a little too orange. Now, if I were doing this in gouache, I would have started the wash here in the center of the table, because what happens, especially up against these facets, if this gets blurred, guys, right along here, if I drag, if the color's off, it's in the shadow. Okay, it's in a part of the stone that isn't critical. Another place you could do it is along the back side of these facets. I would not start right on top of the white facets, because the white's going to tend to want to drag and pull and cause you problems. Okay, now because I'm digital, and you can do this with the gouache as well, I can come in. I don't have to do a flat glaze of color. I can mix, a little variation in. And once again, the extent to which I would do this would depend on how much time I had with the project, how big the stone was. These are big colored stones, so a little variation of color is kind of nice. I wouldn't do much more than that. Now, on the white, the diamond, there is actually a glaze done here too. It's going to be in white. What you want to look at, you want to look at your stones and see how dark they are overall. This one is about right. This one's a little too dark. Okay? So knowing that, I'm going to come in and gouache. This would be watered out white, just like in the color. White with a paint brush, not too dry, but you don't want any pooling. And it would be drawn in diagonals, like so. The place you don't want it to come is you don't want it to come under here very much. But up here outside of those star facets in the upper left corner, you can get it quite light and have it be okay. The other place you can bring it is in here. But once again, you don't want to hit these dark facets because they're important. This stone looks pretty good. Alright. Once I've done the glazing on both the diamond and the color, I'm going to come back in and I'm going to re-emphasize, re-clean up or bring back some white. Okay? Oh, hang on, folks. That isn't white. It's gray. Oh, maybe I was wrong. It was looking gray to my eye. I can come in and reassert some crispness after doing that wash of white. And that's twice I've done that on that stone. It's a real temptation for me to fill that in. Okay. Now what I've lost a little bit of is some of the dark up in this corner. That's a risk. I am also going to put some diagonal lines paint not too thick, almost glazes again, emphasizing the flatness of the table, like we were painting metal flat with the diagonal line. Okay, that stone's okay. I am very tempted to come back in and bring back some dark in here. But it's dangerous to do. It can go wrong. And at this stage in the stone, folks, it goes wrong, it stays wrong. You know what? That's okay. It's alright. It isn't my favorite diamond ever, but it's okay. This little stone over here is held up better. Except for I just used the wrong color. I might emphasize the edges a little bit. Might pick up this facet line a little. Pick up this facet line a little. It's always good, if you can get away with it, to put a little bit of highlight on a diamond right around these darkened facets. I would do it here too. And the diagonal line across the table also works nicely. There. Okay. That stone's good enough. Tempted to do a little breaking down of this. I'm being very picky with your time and my computer resources. But I might break those up just a little, because it's a big swath of very, very dark. Okay. Stop. All right, now on the colored stones. Bring back some white. Don't bring back too much. Otherwise it stops being a colored stone. I might have brought in a little too much white on those star facets, this one in particular. That might be a little nicer. Fine. You want kind of a balance. You want to feel that there's a dispersion of light and dark across the stone that's pleasing to the eye. You don't want all, you want more light or dark to read the form, but you don't want it to be so out of balance that it isn't attractive. I'm going to connect these two. Almost very dangerous game I'm playing, but and once again a little bit of white light dancing around. It's done. Okay, guys, that's it. That's the finished presentation. Hopefully, I can upload it for you, and it does you some good. Thanks for paying attention. See you in class.